Welcome back to Media Scan. Viewers, the horror of grooming gangs in the UK was back in headlines this week when a minor Sikh girl was abducted and forced to undergo all the harassment which so many British, Hindu, Sikh and other girls have been facing. With great effort, the family was able to rescue the girl, but with very little help from the local police. Why is the UK, the British government, unable to control the horror, the crime of these grooming gangs? In another matter, quite ironical if I may say, the UAE decided it will restrict funding for their meritorious students who want to go and study in UK campuses because according to the UAE Sultanate, these youth, these meritorious students, when they go to the UK, they come back badly radicalized in jihadi Islam. How ironical can that get? So, on Media Scan this evening, why is UK unable to control this criminal grooming gangs? Also, why are jihadis having a free run in UK campuses? To discuss these sensitive issues, we have two friends joining us from London. But before that, a quick look at what really happened to the Sikh girl.
Why is this allowed in 2026 in the UK? This is supposed to be one of the clearest countries in the world. How is this allowed?
A Sikh teenage girl in London's Hounslow was freed earlier this week after an intervention of thousands of community members who came to her rescue. The girl was abducted by a middle-aged Afghan man who had been brainwashing her for a long time to leave her home and then sexually assaulted her along with a few other men of the grooming gang. A tactics to lure young girls into romantic relations and then subjecting them to systematic sexual abuse. Her parents had approached police repeatedly but were denied assistance in her rescue. They finally sought help from their community members to free their daughter. The Hindu and Sikh community members in the UK have been complaining for a long time that their young girls are being targeted by grooming gang members.
So with that story, let me connect to our friends from London. I have here with me Pandit Satish Sharma. You know him well, an activist for the Hindu cause, for the community, working relentlessly in the UK, and also young, vivacious Viransh Bhanushali, a student in the Oxford campus, someone who is a first-hand victim of the racism that is afflicting these Western campuses. Welcome, Pandit Sharma, Viransh. And if I may come back first to Panditji, sir, I remember very well in one of our episodes last year, that is 25, you were telling us that you had held a very informative, a very serious discussion in the premises of the British Parliament, where you highlighted that the victim of this horrible grooming gangs are not only Christian or British girls, but there are Hindu and Sikh girls who are equally targeted. However, it was ignored by the authorities, if I am not wrong. And today we have this very unfortunate case of the Sikh girl. How would you put this whole episode?
Jai Shri Ram ji, and thank you for taking up this very thorny and difficult subject. It's something that desperately needs to be spoken about. And it's also something which is being given minimum airtime in the British media. So thank you for doing this. Yes, we did have that event. Yes, it was presented with evidence, and yes, it was completely ignored. I recall the late 1990s when we had wars, literally battles on the streets of Southall, of Birmingham, of Leicester, of places where the Indian community had set up its own areas and was very comfortably settled. There were running battles on the streets involving knives, involving swords. It was extremely violent, and it took a lot of effort from the community leaders, to quell that violence. And the subject was, even then in the 1990s, the targeting of Hindu and Sikh girls by young Muslim Pakistani origin men. So since the 1990s, we're now almost 40 years later, and nothing has been done. This is not, I don't think, anymore incompetence. I don't think anymore that it is a systemic sort of oversight and a process which needs to be fixed. My study of it has really revealed a number of things, and I'll be happy to share them with you as we progress. But there is a great deal of wisdom to be found in what the Pakistani Muslim young men soldiers did in 1971 in Bangladesh. They used the targeting of vulnerable majority Hindu women with one purpose, and that purpose was repeatedly stated. They said, and Yahya Khan, I remember his infamous statement, kill 3 million and the rest will eat out of our hands. But there were many soldiers who said that they were given instructions to target women because they wanted to change the gene pool. Now, it's very difficult for civilized people to think in this way, and it's very difficult for civilized people to understand how the mind of such a demonic personality works. But if you do dig deep, then you find a different agenda at work. Now, I don't call this grooming gangs, I don't call this love jihad. From a historical point of view, the assault on the womb of a target enemy is something that has reverberated through history. And in Bharat, we've been on the receiving end of that for a long time. The correct phrase for this would be Garb Jihad. And in fact, I did a report recently where I highlighted that Ashwatthama in the Mahabharata, his intention was to destroy the Vansh, destroy the future of the Pandava lineage completely. And what I think is now being done, there is enough evidence for us to say that this is not an act of some irrational young men acting in a manner which is despicable. This is an act of war. It's a war on the future of the British society, but also the societies here who do not correspond and who present a threat to the ethos of this demonic enemy.
Yes, Pandit Sharma, I think those are very serious and also very sinister charges. But it also shows that there is a much larger game here in play. It's not just, these are not just crimes of passion at all. They are well thought, and there is a philosophy, a thinking that goes behind it. Allow me to come to Viransh quickly and ask him. Viransh, Pandit Sharma has just told us that this may not, the failure to control these grooming gangs, if that is the right phrase, may not be due to inability. There may be something larger in the thing. Why do you think the UK administration is failing? I mean, cases are being raised. Of course, some people have been sentenced, but the problem has not lessened at all. It might actually be getting worse.
So I think a pretty good clue exists in the report that was done about the massive grooming and scandal, effectively, in Rotherham. The issue, I think, fundamentally, especially for the British administration, has come down to the idea that claims against discrimination and racism, which were initially meant to be a shield for minorities, are now being used as a sword by communities that are trying to sort of use that to shield themselves from the consequences of their actions. I think, I believe in the report itself, it was mentioned that British police were reluctant to charge the individuals that they have pretty good evidence for, in fact, to charge and convict, because they were afraid of being called racist. In fact, how classification itself works in the UK also has a detrimental impact on Indians, because a lot of crime statistics are classified merely as Asian. That includes Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. Whereas if you actually look at the data, it is not the Indians that are necessarily, at all, in fact, rather, a part of these grooming gangs. They are one very particular sort of data set, which are conveniently just put under the larger umbrella of Asian. I think this all sort of adds to Pandit Ji's point, that it is a systemic sort of evasion of accountability, because somewhere I think, if for the lack of a better word, the British administration has grown negligent, if not lethargic, in trying to deal with these issues.
Okay, I also want to come back to you on the question of the campuses which we were just talking about. But before that, I am happy to be joined by another guest here in the studios. Malika Pandey, you have heard her on earlier occasions. Malika, welcome, namaskar. And quickly, your take on this issue of the grooming gangs, particularly after the issue, has has been highlighted once again with the incident of the Sikh girl, I may just remind that the Sikh girl was being targeted, was being pursued by this Afghan man whose name has come out in the case and some of the people with him for several years now. That is what her family has been able to narrate. And they were repeatedly trying to alert the police. But even on that day, when they were trying to recover the girl from that flat, the police was not, appearing quite reluctant to let the people. And finally, the girl could be rescued, not by the police, but with the pressure and the efforts of the community.
Ma'am, thank you so much for having me. It's a series of unfortunate events that have happened, and it's I've been following this grooming gang story for a very long time, since 2002. If you see, when the MP Anne Cry raised this issue in the UK Parliament, and she repeatedly said that there are the presence of grooming gangs.
So that means this has been going on at least for 2 decades,
yes,
if not more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you start decoding it from there, so suddenly in 2010, we see this MP's resignation because she was getting a lot of political threats. She was being said that, oh, she's targeting a racial community. And that's what you see. She repeatedly said that's why the law enforcements in the UK are not registering the complaints, because they fear that they will be a part of the communal rights there. They will be branded as being racial to a certain community. And then you see there is this a watershed movement which came, which was in 2010. There is this Professor Alexis J, who conducted an independent study in Rotterdam. And in Rotterdam alone, we find 1,400 such cases which have happened. She again repeatedly said about it, nothing happened. She gave 20 pointers to the local police, but nothing was happening there. Nobody took anything into account. Then finally, the third thing which came up was just last year, after so many repeated comments by senior journalists. There were whistleblowers from their own police, Metropolitan Police, which like Maggie and several journalists who continuously raised their voices, but nothing happened. But in the British Parliament, just last year, the Baroness the MP raised her concerns about, whatever was happening across the UK on these, and she said that because of certain ethnicity which was involved, and she has conducted this research all across UK, certain ethnicity which involved majority of Pakistani nationals and Asians were involved in these gangs. So, and then you see that in June also, again in the UK Parliament, that she's again being branded as...
No, we actually, Malika, we have gone in a lot of detail about what all happened last year over these issues of the grooming gangs. But, I'm slightly on the point of this issue about Hindu and Sikh girls being targeted, because up till now, if you look at the narrative, the focus has been on the targeting of British girls. So can you quickly, in one line, tell us, how do you look at that?
Like I said, it's a series of organized crime which is happening.
Yes.
The pattern is very similar. Like you said, Hindu and Sikh girls being targeted. It's just a similar pattern which is being held in different parts of the country, but it is just a similar pattern. Same involvement of the ethnic group that we are discussing about. So it is very unfortunate. And yesterday, a few days ago, where we see these Sikh people rescued her.
Yes.
Otherwise, people would have not even come to know. These
Correct.
200 Sikh men go there and they rescue this girl, and just the same age group. You also see, ma'am, there are 10-year-old girls which are being held.
Yes, there are girls as old as 6 and 8-year-old.
6 and 8-year-old
how harrowing can it get? But allow me to come back to Pandit Sharma here. Sir, very quickly, because I want to move on to the next topic on the table. What do you have in mind for the protection of these Hindu and Sikh girls, the girls who come from an Indian origin? How can we protect them from these vultures?
No confidence in the state apparatus to offer that protection. It's actually become quite clear. There is a triad, isn't there, when it comes to the abuse of vulnerable children and women. And that is that there are the abusers, there are the victims, and then there are the enablers, the people who hide it and allow it to continue. And it's apparent that both the police and indeed the judiciary and indeed the politicians have all become enablers. This is, I think it's gone on far too long, and it's far too serious for us to continuously say that this is systemic and there's some sort of a process fault. It's not. This is policy. And I think we have to accept it as policy. And what the Sikh community, the men in that community did, is they accepted it, that this is policy. If we don't do something now, we will lose one of our daughters. And this is a very difficult and tragic state for a society to get to, when there's no confidence left in either the police to protect its citizens or the politicians and judiciary to give justice. But I want to really put something into the ground, and I'd like to do it here. Article 2 of the United Nations Geneva Convention on Genocide is very clear. And it says, and this, what's been going on, actually falls within Clause D of this particular article, that it's deemed to be genocide if you impose measures intended to prevent births within the group. And so exactly the same as happened in 1971, we are seeing a particular violent and ideologically driven group who are determined to attack the capacity of the United Kingdom's indigenous civilization to reproduce its society, and it's a target on its next generation.
Yes,
Sooner or later, I think people will
yes.
come to this understanding.
Yes, it's you know, even though the case of this Sikh girl is so unfortunate, but maybe if it can help open the eyes of the community to take these cases more seriously, perhaps there will be pressure on the administration, on the police at some point of time. But on that note, I must move on to the next topic on the table. And as I was saying, you know, there is such an irony involved here. A West Asian country, the UAE to be precise, recently gave an order. And according to media reports, the UAE has been restricting funds for admissions to British universities, claiming that the campuses were being radicalized by Muslim Brotherhood, designated as a terrorist organization by the UAE. UAE government has been limiting these funds of late for all the students who go to UK because they want to prevent their students from exposure to Islamic radicalization, despite a rise in the students who are willing to study in British campuses. We have Viransh here, who himself is a target of these racial attacks while studying in the campus of the Oxford. Viransh, quickly your take.
I'm going to divide that into two parts. I think there is generally really, perhaps interesting is the wrong word, but a very unique sort of racism that Indians very often face. We're often called the model minority. And as a result of that, a lot of sort of the native population here thinks that Indians don't really have it that bad when it comes to racism. But especially how racism works in the UK, for example, very subtle, very nuanced in a certain way. A lot of racial attacks against Indian students just end up being treated as okay and normalized. So what that's eventually meant is you can almost say anything you want against India, the nation, at a British campus, and so long as it's against it, there will be a whole faction of individuals who will be more than happy to support you, and there'll be no consequences for them. I think the issue has just become that, and I think this also relates to a certain extent as to what happened, in the case of the unfortunate Sikh girl or Rotherham or the grooming gangs in general, which is institutions in this country have become a bit too reluctant to act just of the fear of being called racist or Islamophobic. And I think that
Viransh, a very straight question. Are people who have, affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood active in these campuses? Yes or no?
So, I mean, also, the question sort of requires you to define what the Muslim Brotherhood is. But I can sort of assure you for a fact that there are sort of political groups that tend to exercise pressure via student organizations on campus. That can the Muslim Brotherhood, that can be a variety of Islamic or other sort of pressure group organizations. Even like in Oxford, in Cambridge, in London, you will very often see a protest come out of nowhere. And you sort of wonder who paid for the vans, who paid for the slogans, who paid for the posters. And more often than not, you'll find the answer is the same.
Got it. Pandit Sharma, are jihadis having a free run in UK campuses? Is the Muslim Brotherhood pushing for this kind of radicalization to the extent that the UAE is also now avoiding them?
Yes, in fact, I have to compliment the UAE for taking this decision so promptly, because the Indian government has failed to do so. Exactly what is being done to students from the Emirates has been done to Indian students for a long period of time. As you may recall, I have represented and fought the corner for people like Rashmi Samant, Lakshmi Subramanian, and so many other students who were targeted and discriminated against because of their national identity and their religious identity. You know, it's quite strange. The UAE have recognized straight away the problems in Oxford and Cambridge. And I think it's most appropriately summarized as that these are Euro-Christianist madrasas. They were established on the principles delineated by James Mills about India. And this is a man who denigrated and vilified the civilization, never having visited it. And his teachings became the core teachings in Oxford for every member of the British administration who was going to go to Bharat. And so
Pandit Sharma, I don't have much time left. Allow me to ask you a straight question. The US and half a dozen other countries have proscribed the Muslim Brotherhood. That includes the UAE. Why can't the UK do it?
Because Pakistan is a garrison state of the United Kingdom.
Got it, sir. Very quickly, coming back to Malika. Malika, do you think this disease of radicalization in the campuses might spread away from the UK to other campuses in the European countries? And is the UK government doing enough?
Of course, ma'am, like I said, I mean, it's a spillover effect. And you see the mayor of London, when he was asked last year about, Sadiq Khan clearly said, what is grooming gang? He hardly knew about the grooming gang. And he clearly stated that let's not target one of the ethnicities. His own metropolitan chief said that he took a U-turn. The metropolitan chief said, no, there's nothing like this exists. But then after it was discussed in the parliament, then he said, no, we're looking after historical cases and there are so many cases which are being reported now. So you see there's a lot of confusion within the UK government, which is coming up. And yes, of course, it's going to spill over to other places as well, like we're seeing. And it is already doing so. These girls are being targeted on the basis of their religion. These girls are being targeted on the base of their, they're being given gifts, expensive gifts, they're being manipulated, and then they're being trafficked.
Yes, but if I may add, it was after a lot of public pressure, of course, a lot of street protests, but finally some people did get sentenced. But unfortunately, as Malika has just pointed out, the first step in solving a problem, in solving a challenge, is to recognize that it's a problem. If the UK government and campuses are going to continue to be in denial, I do not think we have a great future to look forward to for their students there, for these young, unfortunate girls who have to go through such a horror at such a tender age. But I am afraid, viewers, that's all the time we have on Media Scan this evening. So, on that note, it's a wind-up for this episode. Please wait and watch us in the next episode. For now, thank you very much to Pandit Satish Sharma, to Viransh, and to Malika here for finding time for Media Scan on the weekend. See you again. Namaskar.